Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ngee Ann Kongsi IPS Research Fund signing and cheque presentation ceremony. We are grateful to everyone for taking the time to join us today and are delighted to have Minister for Home Affairs and Law, Mr. K Shanmugam, as our guest of honor. IPS Director, Mr. Janadas Devan, will begin by making his remarks. He will be followed by Mr. Jamie Teo, Vice President and Chairman of the Donation and Charity Subcommittee at the Ngee Ann Kongsi. We will then invite Minister Shanmugam to say a few words before we move on to the signing and cheque presentation. At this juncture, we would like to remind all attendees to keep your masks on, switch your mobile phones to silent mode, and remain in your seats throughout the event. Minister, Mr. Teo, and Director, you may remove your mask when delivering your remarks, but please put it back on once you are done. And now, without further ado, Mr. Devan will deliver his welcome remarks. Director, please.
Thank you. Minister Shanmugam, Mr. James Teo, President of the Ngee Ann Kongsi, Mr. Vice President Jamie Teo, all our names start with J, and Professor Danny Kwa, Dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm delighted to welcome all of you here to the Ngee Ann Kongsi and the Institute of Policy Studies signing and cheque presentation ceremony. We're grateful to have Minister Shanmugam here today. The Ngee Ann Kongsi's donation is one of the largest and most significant donations IPS has received since it was founded. I would like to express my utmost gratitude to the Ngee Ann Kongsi for supporting and believing in us and the work and research that we do. Your generous donation will support 6 of our key projects. They span various public policy areas and are largely focused on building bridges among and between communities, as is fitting. The donations will help support the IPS Policy Laboratory, our scenario planning exercise entitled Reimagining Singapore 2030, our flagship Singapore Perspectives Annual Conference, the Ngee Ann Kongsi IPS panel study on the impact, effects, and expectations of low-income households in post-COVID Singapore, very long title, the Ngee Ann Kongsi IPS Citizens Panels, and finally, the Ngee Ann Kongsi Community Fellowship. A few words about each of these projects. The IPS Policy Lab, as its name suggests, aims to combine policy research with small-scale policy experiments to test-bed ideas which may potentially be scaled up. Reimagining Singapore 2030 is an ongoing scenario planning exercise. It will, among other things, gather the views of more than 20,000 Singaporeans on our future through an innovative online engagement tool. Singapore Perspectives, about which I don't need to say much, will next month, January, be on the theme City. Singapore, as all of you know, is the world's only full-fledged city-state. The other two, Monaco and Vatican City, are not quite the same. They're more tourist sites. The Ngee Ann Kongsi IPS panel study on the impact, effects, and expectations of low-income households will, as its name suggests, survey low-income families with the purpose of improving current interventions. Next, the Ngee Ann Kongsi IPS Citizens Panel series. I'll say this a little more about this. It's a platform for Singaporeans to be more involved in policy-making processes. As it so happens, IPS pioneered these kinds of citizen panels, bringing citizens from all walks of life to share their views on current policies, which then culminate in a set of recommendations that you present to policymakers. Since 2017, we have convened a number of citizen panels on a range of topics like work-life harmony was the most recent, recycling, and diabetes too. With the Ngee Ann Kongsi's funding, IPS will be conducting 2 further panels. The first will focus on mental health among youth in Singapore and will be conducted with Republic Polytechnic students. And finally, the Ngee Ann Kongsi Community Fellowship. This is a new initiative to enable us to grant short-term fellowships to community leaders and change makers from the non-profit sector. It's the first such fellowship in Singapore. and I'm delighted to announce the appointment of Mr. Lee Un-soo and Ng Bi Ling as our first two community fellows. I thank Ngee Ann Kongsi again for your generous support of Singapore's research and academic community and the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy in particular. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director. May I now invite Mr. Jamie Teo to deliver his speech, please.
Mr. K Shanmugam, Minister of Home Affairs and Minister for Law, Mr. Janadas Devan, Director, Institute of Policy Studies, fellow members of the Ngee Ann Kongsi Committee on Management, media friends. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Firstly, I would like to extend our appreciation to Minister K Shanmugam. Thank you for taking time to grace this ceremony as our guest of honor. We are pleased to announce today that the Ngee Ann Kongsi is formalizing our intention to contribute 2.94 million over the next 3 years to support the Institute of Policy Studies, or IPS, and its upcoming projects. We understand that these will include the new IPS Policy Lab, IPS's flagship conference named Singapore Perspectives, and a COVID-19 panel study on low-income households. We fully support these projects as they will generate insights to how current social policies and interventions can be further enhanced. We believe these will contribute to community development and seed impactful and effective change. The support for IPS is in line with the Ngee Ann Kongsi's efforts to broaden and deepen its philanthropic support for Singapore's education sector, and this includes contributing to research and programs that have far-reaching and meaningful benefits for the society. The Ngee Ann Kongsi continues to actively support a number of educational, cultural, and welfare causes in Singapore, and we have been exploring opportunities to support more Singaporeans beyond the Teochew community. To this end, the Ngee Ann Kongsi provides funding to many educational institutions through scholarships, study awards, and donations. Over the last 14 years, we have donated to over 70 schools and tertiary institutions, with more donations to be formalized in time to come. We are proud and excited to embark on this new journey with IPS, and we wish IPS success for the projects that are covered under the collaboration. We believe that our intended funding will empower IPS with the resources to examine issues and develop solutions that add value to public policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Teo. May I now invite Minister to deliver his remarks, please.
Mr. James Teo, President of the Ngee Ann Kongsi, and Vice President, Mr. Jamie Teo, Prof. Danny Kwa, Dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, and Mr. Janadas Devan, Director of this institute. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here at this ceremony to recognize this contribution, a very generous donation by the Ngee Ann Kongsi, just under $3 million, 2.94 million to be exact. It's the largest donation to IPS since the one IPS received at its founding. We would like to thank Ngee Ann Kongsi for your very generous contribution. It'll go a long way towards supporting the work that IPS does. And everyone is thanking me for being here. Ngee Ann Kongsi is giving the money and IPS is doing the work. I'm just turning up. But apart from, I suppose, Ngee Ann Kongsi did talk to me to understand a little bit more to see whether they ought to be making this contribution. And I told them that this is an extremely important institute. Its work is worth supporting. And I will put it in these terms. Today, if you look at countries, big and small, every country faces very complex problems. The global landscape is fractured. If you look at it in geopolitical terms, the polarization between countries and within societies, even before the pandemic, the issues caused by the pandemic, the social issues, the inequality issues, these are issues faced by many countries. And they all have significant impact on the day-to-day lives of people, including Singaporeans, lives, families, identity, identification with society, even the role of a national identity and countries. And while government takes the lead in trying to, and has to take the lead in trying to deal with these issues, it's not possible for most governments in the world to try and deal with these issues on their own. They need a wide variety of inputs. And the quality of the inputs are extremely important, because you've got to try and make sense of the issues, see the different perspectives, and try and understand the different perspectives in order to try and reach some answers. And governments increasingly turn to a variety of partners, including research institutes, think tanks, and they play a very important part, very important role in shaping the government's thinking in policy making. Including in Singapore, we take that very seriously. We work with a number of different institutes, some focused on foreign policy, some focused on defense matters, some focused on security matters, some focused on socio-economic issues. And it gives the government the broader width and depth that government alone will find difficult to have. And the research institutes also provide spaces for Singaporeans to have discussions about many of these issues and where we want to go as a society and how to get there and advance an understanding of our society and gain insights, develop solutions to the challenges. IPS has contributed significantly in all these counts since it was established 33 years ago, 1988. It was the first institute of its kind to not just examine issues of critical national interest, but also facilitate open discussions, inclusive discussions on the direction that the country ought to take. And many of my colleagues and I have participated in various IPS events. Most recently in June, IPS organized the inaugural IPS Women's Conference, which I took part in. So the donation by the Kongsi will help increase IPS's research capacity and advance new initiatives which are very much in the same vein. You heard about them, the IPS Policy Laboratory. I think it conducts social policy experiments, and it strengthens the link between policymakers, academics, and the social sector. And the other exciting project among the 6, I think all of them are extremely interesting, but the Reimagining Singapore 2030 project. So as a scenario planning, it will gather views from diverse groups, translate them into action plans for different sectors, and to collaborate on further and adapt on their own use. The Kongsi has a very rich history in making today's donation. Is part and parcel of what the Kongsi has been doing for a very long time. It consistently provides philanthropic support to our education sector through bursaries, scholarships, professorships, and many other charitable causes. And during COVID-19, I think they set up a fund for tertiary students who faced financial challenges and launched 2 COVID-19 relief funds for those who lost their incomes due to the pandemic, and it helps over and above what the government has been doing. And they've also supported the Ngee Ann Kongsi IPS panel study on the impact, effects, and expectations of Singaporeans in low-income households in post-COVID-19 Singapore, as Jana said it earlier, and aims to better understand the needs, worries, and aspirations of low-income families in the post-COVID-19 world. And the Ngee Ann Kongsi Community Fellowship, it empowers community leaders, non-profit sector to conduct research for community development on social change. So we would thank the Ngee Ann Kongsi once again for the generosity and wish IPS the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We would now like to invite Minister to the middle of the stage to witness the agreement signing. The agreement will be signed by Mr. James Teo and Mr. Jamie Teo from the Ngee Ann Kongsi, Prof. Danny Kwa, Dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, and Mr. Devan. The signatories will now sign the agreements. We will now take a group photo to commemorate the signing of the agreement. Minister, Mr. James Teo, Mr. Jamie Teo, Prof. Kwa, and Director, please remove your mask for the photo taking. Thank you. We will now move on to the cheque presentation. May we first invite Minister to the front of the stage. And now, may we have the other signatories move to the front of the stage. We would now like to invite Mr. James Teo to present the cheque to Mr. Devan. Mr. James Teo and Director, kindly remain on stage. Minister, Mr. Jamie Teo, and Prof. Kwa, you may now wear your masks and take your seats. We would now like to present the Ngee Ann Kongsi with a token to express our appreciation for their generous support. Illustrated by IPS staff Hua Ming Xian, the artwork of the institution's buildings with their organization's colors symbolizes the coming together of the two entities. Thank you, Mr. James Teo and Director. We have now come to the end of the signing and cheque presentation. We would like to thank Minister and our guests from the Ngee Ann Kongsi for being present at today's ceremony. They will now be taking their leave.